Let's continue creating our application. I will finish this method, but before that, I'm going to change my book model a little bit. I'm going to add another field in my book class. I'm going to call it ID. Basically, when we receive data from our database, there is always some column, some field named ID, and it's identifying our current object or our record, as we will see in future videos. It's almost always unique, and we are going to simulate some database, so I'm going to use some ID in here as well. But in order to do that, I need to change this constructor. I'm going to delete it and let the IntelliJ to create one for me. Also, I need to do a getter and setter method in here as well. The other thing I need to do is to change this to string as well, because right now it's not containing the ID field. Okay, that's as simple as that. But if we switch to our all books activity, we probably will get some errors, because when we define some new book, we didn't define the ID field. I'm going to comment these in here because we won't be needing these from now on. We are going to initialize our books array list in here. Okay, in order to do that, I'm going to first move this method at the bottom of my page. Then I'll define a field in here. I'm going to call it ID. It will be static. It will be clear in a minute why am I doing this. Okay. Next, I'm going to copy and paste some piece of code in order to save some time. We will see what I'm copy and pasting. Okay, what is all of this code? Basically, these are some books that I added into my books array list. I'm defining some name, author, pages, image URL, and description in here. The ID field, the ID integer that I just created, I'm incrementing each time, and then pass it as the ID. It will be unique because we are incrementing every time. Then I pass some values to these fields of my book, and then created that book and added it to my books array list. I got all of these books from Goodreads website. If you are interested, take a look at it, and all the copyrights goes to goodreads.com. Basically, these are the 100 popular books in all time. Okay, let's continue on. I just created 15 books and added it to our array list. Nothing important in here, so we don't need this to do anymore. We have done our job in here. In order to see the list of books, let's go to this all books activity and let's create an instance of my util object. Util is equal to new util. I don't need to pass anything to the constructor. In here I will create a new array list of kind book. Books is equal to new array list. But I will delete this one from here. Okay. Books is equal to utils. We know that we have a getter method, get all books, and I'll pass the books to this setBooks method of this adapter. Now if you run our application, we can see what have I added to our list of books. By clicking on this see all books, I can see a list of books available for me, and also because there are 50 of them, I can even scroll. And as you probably noticed, every time that I scroll, Recycler View is getting some values, or the adapter is passing some items to the recycler view, and the recycler view is, for example, in here downloading the images. Okay, I just created a simple list of books in order to make our application a little bit more realistic. But right now, if I click on these book items, nothing interesting is happening. It's just showing me some toast message. I don't want that, so I'm going to navigate the user to another page by clicking on this book item, or by clicking on any of the recycler view items. In order to do that, first let's create the other page that we are going to navigate to. Okay, I'm going to do so by creating a new activity from here. We have seen how to create activity. Right click on the package, new activity, and from here I'm going to choose empty activity. I'm going to call it book activity and leave everything else as default. First, I want to create the layout file of this new activity. For that, let's switch to this XML file, to text view as always, and change this to relative layout. This is going to be the activity that we are going to show the details of our book. For that, I'm going to create a simple relative layout in here, match parent and match parent. Let's add the name at the top, wrap content and wrap content, ID, book name. Let's give it a text, book name, also some style, bold maybe, and let's increase its size to 20 sp. Let's move it to center horizontally. Also, let's give it a margin from top, 50 dp for example. Next, I'm going to show the picture, show the image view. For that, let's say 200 dp by 200 dp. That seems about fine. Below, our book name, some placeholder. I'm not sure if I explained what a placeholder is. Basically, a placeholder is some piece of picture, or maybe some piece of text, for example in here, that will show in our view if there is nothing else to be shown in here. The minute that we are changing this image or this text from our Java code, this will be changed as well. Placeholder is self-explanatory, and it will hold the place until we change it. Okay, let's move it to center horizontally, margin top maybe, let's say 30 dp, and an ID as well. Let's say book image. Also, let's create another text view, match parent as the width and wrap content as the height. Let's move it below our book image, margin top 20 dp, text, description, also margin left and right. Or I can change this one to margin from here. Also an ID as well. Let's say book description. Also, let's add the author's name at the top in here. Text view, wrap content and wrap content, text, author, name, ID, author name, and style maybe italic, size 18 sp, and below our book name, center horizontal. But we need to pass the ID in here as author name. Okay, let's move this whole relative layout to center. But before that, let's change this height to wrap content and the center vertical. That's true. Okay, that seems about fine. It's not the best design, but you can design it however you want. Okay, let's move on to Java code. In here, let's define our elements. I had some text view. The first one is book name, author name, also description. We had an image view as well. Let's initialize all of them in another method. Private void init widgets. In here, book name is equal to text view r.id dot book name. Also author name and description. Book image. Okay, that's fine. But how are we going to navigate to this activity, and how are we going to get all of these books features? We can do that via intents. If you remember, I said that we can pass data through intent. In here, instead of showing a toast message, I'm going to define a new intent. Let's say intent is equal to new intent. But we are not inside an activity and we can't use this. Instead, I'm going to use the context that we are receiving from the constructor of this adapter class. And the destination, of course, is bookActivity.class. But we can't use a start activity in here because we are not inside an activity, and that start activity is an inner method of every activity. Instead, we can say context.startActivity and pass intent. But this is an empty intent and it's just navigating us to this book activity, and this activity has no idea which books details should show to the user. Well, we can pass the ID of the book, for example, to the intent by saying intent.putExtra. In here, we need to define a key. For example, let's say ID or book ID, and pass the value that we want. For example, let's say books.get, pass the position and .get ID. We are sending some data within the intent by using this method putExtra. First, we need to define a key in order to get that value later on from inside this book activity. Then we pass our value in here, which is the book ID that user is clicking on or tapping on. Next, we will go to that intent, go to that activity via this intent. In here, in order to get the value of that intent, we can define a new intent, but instead of saying new intent, we can say get intent. It's also another inner method in every activity which you can get the incoming intent. Now I can define an integer called id and get it from the intent by saying .get integer extra and pass the key that I just created. Also, we need to pass some default value in here in case our incoming intent doesn't have any value called id or any value with this key, or maybe we don't receive any intent at all. Now that we have the id of our book, we can use it to retrieve the related book from that util class. For that, we can say something like this. We can instantiate the util class. Then we can get the books array list, the all books array list. For that, I can define a new array list of type book. Let's call it book books is equal to util dot get all books. Now I can use a for each loop in order to get that specific ID. For that, I can say book, which is the data type. I'm going to call it B in my books array list. We have seen the use of for each loop in Java session, so I'm not going to explain the syntax in here. We are going to loop through all of the elements inside this array list and check if its ID is equal to the ID that we just received from the intent. If this ID is equal to the current ID that we have, then we'll continue. In here we can set the text and images of our views. For example, we can say book name dot set text to b dot get name. As simple as that. Also description to b dot get description. But for book image, I'm going to use glide once again. Glide.width. We are inside some context, some activity, so I can pass this dot as bitmap dot load and pass the book's image URL. Then dot into our view, which is book image in here. As simple as that. I think our application is ready, and if we run it, if I click on this see all books button, I can see a list of books, and if I click on one of them, for example this Pride and Prejudice, we can see the name of the book, the name of the author, an image of the book, and also some description that I copied and pasted from Goodreads. Okay, I think this video is getting a little bit long. In the next video we will continue working on our application. See you in the next video.